On November 14th, 1978, Eleanor Marsh made her final entry in the Pemberton College Special Collections catalog. Card number 47,209. A 17th-century Dutch maritime atlas. Donor anonymous. Appraised value $14,000. At 6:15 that evening, the Aldrich reading room went dark. Campus security found her the next morning, slumped over her typewriter, a half-finished index card still in the carriage. The coroner ruled it cardiac arrest, natural causes, case closed within 72 hours. But they never explained why every drawer in the card catalog had been pulled open, or why the maritime atlas, the one she'd just cataloged, was missing from the vault, or why Eleanor Marsh, who'd maintained those records for 31 years without a single error, had typed the wrong Dewey Decimal number on her final card. 4 years later, Ruth Vickers drove her Dodge Start through the iron gates of Pemberton College. The maples along College Row had turned the color of old blood. She parked in the visitor lot and sat for a moment, looking at the Aldrich Library through her rain-spotted windshield. Gothic Revival limestone, copper gutters gone green with age. The kind of building that made promises about permanence. Ruth had spent 11 years in the archives at the State Historical Society. 11 years learning that institutions forget more than they remember. That what gets cataloged matters less than what gets left out. She pulled Eleanor Marsh's obituary from her briefcase, cut from the Pemberton Gazette, November 1978. Eleanor had been her graduate advisor, had taught her the difference between a collection and a pile of paper. The obituary mentioned her 31 years of service. It did not mention the missing atlas. It did not mention the open drawers. Ruth folded the clipping and stepped into the October cold. The Aldrich Library smelled the same. Furniture polish and old paper and something underneath both. The particular mustiness of books that had outlived their readers. Ruth signed the guest register at the circulation desk. A young man in a corduroy jacket looked up from his newspaper.
Special Collections. You'll need to speak with Mr. Hadley. He's the curator now.
The clerk pointed toward a door at the back of the main reading room. Ruth walked past tables where students hunched over textbooks, past the reference section with its familiar green spines, past the spot where she'd once spent an entire semester deciphering 16th-century handwriting. The door to Special Collections was new, heavy oak with a brass nameplate. Warren Hadley, curator. Ruth knocked, waited, knocked again. The door opened. The man on the other side had the pale, soft look of someone who spent his life indoors. His smile didn't reach his eyes.
Can I help you?
Ruth introduced herself. Former student, archivist, working on a project about New England library history. Hadley's expression didn't change.
We don't typically allow researchers without an institutional affiliation. College policy.
I was hoping to look at the acquisition records from the 70s, the Marsh years.
Something moved behind Hadley's eyes. There and gone.
Mrs. Marsh's records are part of the permanent archive, not available for general research.
Their acquisition records, donor information, provenance documentation, standard archival material.
Mrs. Marsh had her own system, highly personal. We've been working to integrate her records into the modern catalogue, but the process is ongoing.
Ruth had heard this before. Ongoing. A word that meant never.
What about the maritime atlas? The Dutch one she catalogued the day she died.
Hadley's hand tightened on the doorframe.
I'm afraid I don't know what you're referring to.
Ruth found a payphone in the student union. The building was new since her time. All concrete and glass. Nothing like the brick and stone she remembered. She dialed the State Historical Society. Helen Kowalski picked up on the third ring.
Helen, it's Ruth. I need you to check something for me.
You're supposed to be on vacation.
I need the insurance claim records for Pemberton College, November 1978. Anything related to their special collections.
Ruth heard the familiar sound of Helen's chair rolling across linoleum.
What am I looking for?
A Dutch maritime atlas, 17th century. Should have been appraised at around $14,000.
Give me a day.
Ruth hung up and stood in the phone booth, watching students cross the quad. The Aldrich Library rose behind them, its limestone walls catching the thin October sun. Eleanor Marsh had taught her that every catalog tells two stories: what's there and what someone decided to leave out. Ruth walked to the faculty club. The building hadn't changed: red brick, white columns, the same brass knocker shaped like an owl. The dining room was half empty. She found Donald Prentice at a corner table, working through a bowl of chowder. Prentice had been chair of the history department when Ruth was a student. Now he was emeritus, which meant he had an office he never used, and a table at the faculty club where he held court.
Ruth Vickers. I heard you were asking questions at the library.
News travels fast.
Small campus. Always has been.
Ruth sat down across from him. Prentice had gone gray since she'd last seen him, but his eyes were still sharp.
I'm trying to find out what happened to Eleanor Marsh.
She died. Heart attack. Very sad.
What happened to her records?
Prentice set down his spoon.
What is it you're actually looking for, Ruth?
Ruth told him. The obituary she'd saved. The questions that had nagged at her for 4 years. The open drawers. The missing atlas. Prentice listened without interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment.
Eleanor was meticulous. Obsessively so. If something was wrong with that catalogue, she would have found it.
Wrong how?
I don't know. I'm a historian, not a librarian. But I know she spent her last year cross-referencing her own records, going back through decades of acquisitions.
Why?
She never said, but she asked me once about provenance standards, how you verify where something actually came from.
Ruth leaned forward.
What did you tell her?
The truth. That provenance is only as good as the documentation, and documentation can be forged.
He picked up his spoon again.
Be careful, Ruth. Pemberton has a long memory, and not everyone wants the past examined too closely.
Ruth checked into the Pemberton Inn on Main Street. The room was small. Single bed, dresser, radiator that clanked through the night. She spread her materials on the bed. Eleanor's obituary. A copy of the 1978 Special Collections catalog she'd requested through interlibrary loan. Her own notes from graduate school, yellowed now. Eleanor had taught her that a library was a system of relationships. Every book connected to other books through subject headings, cross-references, call numbers. Pull one card, and you could trace the whole web. Ruth opened the catalog to the final entry. Card 47,209. The Maritime Atlas. The entry was there. Title, date, donor anonymous, appraised value. But the Dewey Decimal number was wrong. Eleanor had typed 912.492. Maps of the Netherlands. A 17th-century Dutch maritime atlas should be 912.4. Maps of Europe. Eleanor Marsh had never made that kind of mistake, unless she'd made it on purpose. The next morning, Ruth found the college archives in the basement of Aldrich Library. A different door than Special Collections, down a flight of stairs that smelled of mildew and institutional cleaner. The archivist was a woman about Ruth's age, with reading glasses pushed up on her forehead and ink stains on her fingers.
Alumni records. You'll need to fill out a request form.
I'm looking for anyone who worked in Special Collections under Eleanor Marsh. Student assistants, work study, anyone.
That would be personnel records. Those are restricted.
What about the alumni directory? That's public.
The archivist considered this.
Class of what year?
1975 through 1978.
The archivist disappeared into the stacks. Ruth waited, listening to the fluorescent lights hum. When the archivist returned, she was carrying 4 bound volumes. Green cloth covers, gold lettering.
Sign the checkout sheet. You can use the reading room upstairs.
She paused.
You knew Mrs. Marsh, didn't you?
She was my advisor.
She talked about you once. Said you asked the right questions.
Ruth spent the afternoon in the reading room, working through the alumni directories. Special Collections had employed 3 student assistants during Eleanor's final years. One was now a lawyer in Boston. One had died in a car accident in 1980. The third, Margaret Weaver, class of 1977, was listed as living in Brattleboro, Vermont. Ruth copied down the address. The payphone at the student union was occupied. She walked to the one outside the post office instead, fed in her coins. Helen Kowalski answered on the second ring.
I found your insurance claim. Pemberton filed in December 1978. 17th-century Dutch maritime atlas. Reported missing from Special Collections.
How much?
That's the interesting part. The claim was for $87,000.
Ruth's hand tightened on the receiver.
Eleanor's catalog said $14,000.
I know. I checked the original appraisal. The college submitted a second appraisal with the claim. Different appraiser, different number.
Who was the second appraiser?
Someone named Warren Hadley.
Ruth drove to Brattleboro the next morning. The leaves were at peak color along Route 9, but she barely noticed. $87,000. 6 times the original appraisal. And the man who'd signed off on it was now the curator of the collection the atlas had been stolen from. Margaret Weaver lived in a yellow farmhouse at the end of a dirt road. When Ruth pulled into the driveway, a woman was raking leaves in the front yard. Mid-30s, wearing overalls and a flannel shirt.
Margaret Weaver?
The woman stopped raking. Her expression went careful.
Who's asking? My name is Ruth Vickers. I'm researching the history of Pemberton's Special Collections.
I graduated 5 years ago. I don't know anything about the current collection.
I'm interested in when you worked there, 1976 and 77.
Margaret's grip tightened on the rake handle.
I think you should leave.
I knew Eleanor Marsh. She was my advisor.
Margaret was quiet for a long moment. Then she leaned the rake against a tree.
You better come inside.
The kitchen was warm. Wood stove in the corner, cast iron kettle steaming. Margaret made tea without asking if Ruth wanted any.
I worked in Special Collections for 2 years. Shelving, filing, helping Mrs. Marsh with the catalogue.
What was she like?
Careful. Everything had to be exact. She'd check my work 3 times before she'd sign off on it.
Margaret set 2 mugs on the table, sat down across from Ruth.
The last few months, though, she changed.
Changed how?
Started staying late, pulling old records. She had me cross-reference donor files against the catalogue entries.
Did she say why?
No, but I saw what she was finding.
Margaret wrapped her hands around her mug.
Gaps. Entries in the catalogue that didn't match the donor files. Books that were supposed to be gifts, but had purchase receipts attached. Appraisals that didn't make sense.
What kind of appraisals?
Same book, different values. Sometimes years apart. Sometimes the second number was 5, 6 times higher than the first.
Ruth pulled out her notebook.
Did Mrs. Marsh ever mention anyone named Warren Hadley?
Margaret's face went still.
He was a graduate student, art history. He did appraisals for the college, private work on the side.
Did you ever see him in Special Collections?
A few times. He'd come in, look at a book, write up an evaluation. Mrs. Marsh didn't like him.
Why not?
She said his numbers were always too high.
Said he was telling the college what they wanted to hear, not what the books were worth.
Ruth wrote that down.
What happened in November 1978? The week Mrs. Marsh died?
Margaret looked away, toward the window.
I wasn't there. I'd graduated the year before. But I heard things.
What things?
That she found something. Something in the records that she wasn't supposed to find.
Margaret stood up, took her mug to the sink.
I can't tell you any more than that. I wasn't there.
Ruth drove back to Pemberton as the sun was setting. The mountains had gone purple in the dying light. She stopped at the first payphone she found, a gas station outside of Wilmington, and called Helen again.
I need you to check something else. Pemberton College insurance claims, going back to 1965.
What am I looking for?
Any claim involving special collections, books, manuscripts, anything with an appraisal attached.
That could take a while.
I know, but I think there's a pattern.
She hung up and stood in the fluorescent glare of the gas station, watching the last light fade from the mountains. Eleanor had found something in the numbers, and someone had made sure she couldn't tell anyone about it. Ruth got back in her car and drove toward the lights of Pemberton, glowing faint in the valley below. The next morning, Ruth went to the Pemberton Town Hall. The building was old, federal style, white clapboard, the kind of place where records went to be forgotten. The clerk was a woman in her 60s, with bifocals and a cardigan that had seen better decades.
I'm looking for property records. Pemberton College, specifically their insurance filings.
Those would be with the state. We just have local property assessments.
What about donor records? Tax filings for charitable contributions.
The clerk peered at Ruth over her glasses.
Those would be confidential. Unless you have a court order.
What about public records? Board of Trustees minutes, that kind of thing?
Those are in the basement. Haven't been touched in years.
Ruth smiled.
I have experience with basements.
The clerk led her down a narrow staircase to a room full of filing cabinets and cardboard boxes. The smell was familiar. Old paper, dust, time.
Good luck. No one's organized these since Nixon.
Ruth spent 6 hours in that basement. The trustees' minutes went back to 1891. Handwritten ledgers giving way to typed pages, giving way to mimeographed copies. She found what she was looking for in the minutes from October 1978, the meeting before Eleanor died. The board had voted to accept a donation from the estate of Harold Pemberton III, the founder's great-grandson. The donation included 17 rare books and manuscripts, appraised at a total value of $412,000. The appraiser was Warren Hadley. Ruth kept reading. The donation had been used to secure a matching grant from the National Endowment for the Humanities. The grant was for $500,000. She flipped to the next month's minutes. November 1978, after Eleanor's death. The board had voted to accept the insurance settlement for the missing maritime atlas, $87,000. The motion was made by the college president. The motion was seconded by the chairman of the board of trustees, Harold Pemberton IV. Ruth drove to the Pemberton Inn and sat in the parking lot, engine running, heater on, trying to make sense of what she'd found. The same family that had donated the rare books had also chaired the board that accepted the insurance payout. The same appraiser had evaluated both the donation and the stolen atlas. And Eleanor Marsh, meticulous, careful Eleanor, had been cross-referencing donor files against catalog entries, looking for gaps, looking for numbers that didn't match. Ruth pulled out the catalog copy she'd been carrying, turned to entry 47,209, the Maritime Atlas. Donor, anonymous. But the Pemberton donation had included 17 items. If the atlas was one of them, if it had been donated by the Pemberton estate and then reported stolen, then the college had collected twice, once from the tax deduction, once from the insurance. And someone had made sure Eleanor couldn't prove it. Ruth's hands were shaking. She turned off the engine and went inside to make some calls. Ellen called back the next morning.
I found your pattern. Pemberton College has filed 19 insurance claims for missing or damaged items from special collections since 1965. Total value, over $600,000.
Who did the appraisals?
That's the thing. The early ones are different appraisers, but starting in 1972, it's the same name on every claim.
Warren Hadley.
How did you know?
Because he's the one who's been inflating the values. The college donates a book worth $10,000, he appraises it at $50,000. They get the tax deduction. Then the book goes missing and they collect the insurance at the inflated value.
That's fraud.
It's worse than that. Eleanor Marsh figured it out, and now she's dead.
Helen was quiet for a moment.
Ruth, you need to be careful.
I need to find out who else knew.
Ruth found Donald Prentice in his office at Pemberton Hall. The room was exactly what she expected. Books floor to ceiling, papers stacked on every surface, a window overlooking the quad. Prentice was grading papers. He looked up when she knocked.
You're still here.
I found something.
She told him. The inflated appraisals, the insurance claims, the connection between the Pemberton family and the Board of Trustees. Prentice listened without interrupting. When she finished, he took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes.
I warned you that Pemberton has a long memory.
Did you know?
I suspected. Eleanor came to me the week before she died. She said she'd found evidence of financial irregularities in the Special Collections records.
What did you tell her?
To be careful, to document everything, to not confront anyone until she had proof.
His voice broke slightly.
I should have told her to leave it alone.
Ruth walked across the quad toward the library. The October wind had teeth now, cutting through her coat. She was halfway across when she saw him. Warren Hadley, standing on the library steps, watching her. He didn't move as she approached, just stood there with his hands in his pockets, that same cold smile from their first meeting.
Miss Vickers, I hear you've been busy.
I've been doing research. That's what archivists do.
Research into matters that don't concern you.
Eleanor Marsh was my advisor. Everything about her concerns me.
Hadley's smile didn't waver.
Mrs. Marsh was a fine librarian, but she had a habit of seeing conspiracies where there were only clerical errors.
Is that what you told the insurance company? That the missing books were clerical errors?
The smile flickered, just for a moment.
Be careful, Miss Vickers. Some questions have answers that people don't want to hear.
Ruth spent that evening in her room at the inn, going through her notes, organizing what she knew. Eleanor had found discrepancies in the catalog, donations that didn't match records, appraisals that had been inflated. Warren Hadley had done the appraisals. The Pemberton family had made the donations. The Board of Trustees, chaired by Harold Pemberton IV, had approved the insurance claims. But she still didn't know how Eleanor had died. Heart attack, the coroner said. Natural causes. Ruth picked up the phone and called the Pemberton County Medical Examiner's office, got an answering machine, left a message asking for the autopsy report from November 1978. Then she sat in the dark, listening to the radiator clank, thinking about what Prentice had said. Document everything. Don't confront anyone until you have proof. Eleanor had followed that advice. She documented everything, and someone had made sure those documents disappeared. The medical examiner's office called back the next morning. Ruth was still in bed when the phone rang.
We have the file you requested. Eleanor Marsh, November 1978. Can you tell me the cause of death? Cardiac arrest. Consistent with a heart attack. Was there an autopsy? No. The death was unattended, but the doctor who signed the certificate didn't request one, said the cause was obvious. Who was the doctor?
Ruth heard pages turning.
Dr. Philip Pemberton.
Ruth sat up in bed.
Pemberton? As in Harold Pemberton? I wouldn't know about that. He was the college physician at the time, retired in 1980.
Ruth thanked her and hung up. Her hands were shaking again. The same family. The donations, the Board of Trustees, the insurance claims, and now the doctor who'd signed Eleanor's death certificate. Every door led back to the same name. Ruth drove to the address she'd found in the alumni directory. Philip Pemberton lived in a colonial house on Maple Street, 3 blocks from the college. The man who answered the door was in his 70s, white-haired, wearing a cardigan over a dress shirt. His hands trembled slightly. Parkinson's, Ruth guessed.
Can I help you?
Dr. Pemberton? My name is Ruth Vickers. I'm researching the history of the college.
I've been retired for 2 years. You'd be better off talking to the current staff.
I'm interested in November 1978. A woman named Eleanor Marsh.
Philip's expression didn't change, but something shifted behind his eyes.
I signed many death certificates in my time at the college. I don't remember them all.
She was the Special Collections librarian. She died at her desk. You ruled it a heart attack.
If that's what the certificate says, then that's what it was.
He started to close the door.
Dr. Pemberton, I know about the appraisals. I know about the insurance claims.
The door stopped moving.
I think you'd better come inside.
The parlor was old money. Antique furniture, oil paintings, oriental rugs worn thin in the paths between chairs. Philip sat in a wingback chair by the window. Ruth sat across from him on a settee that probably cost more than her car.
I was the college physician for 23 years. I treated students, faculty, staff. I signed death certificates when people died.
Did you know Eleanor Marsh?
Everyone knew Eleanor. She ran that library like a private fiefdom.
Did you know she was investigating financial irregularities in special collections?
Philip's hands trembled in his lap.
I knew she was asking questions. She came to see me a few days before she died. Said she'd found evidence that someone was defrauding the college.
What did you tell her?
I told her to take it to the board of trustees.
His laugh was bitter.
I didn't know then that my brother was on the board. I didn't know he was part of it.
Ruth leaned forward.
Your brother, Harold Pemberton IV.
Chairman of the board. 3rd generation. Our family built that college.
And Warren Hadley?
A useful man. He knew how to make numbers say what people wanted them to say.
Did you know what they were doing?
Philip looked out the window. The maples on his lawn were almost bare.
I suspected. After Eleanor died, Harold asked me to sign the certificate without an autopsy. Said it would spare the family, her family, unnecessary distress.
And you agreed?
I agreed. God help me, I agreed. Because he was my brother, and because I didn't want to believe what I suspected.
His voice dropped.
She was 62 years old. No history of heart disease. Found at her desk with every drawer in the catalogue open. And I signed a certificate that said natural causes.
What do you think really happened?
I don't know. But I know it wasn't natural.
Ruth drove back to the inn and sat in the parking lot, engine off, watching the clouds move over the mountains. She had enough now. The inflated appraisals, the insurance fraud, the connection to the Pemberton family, a doctor who'd signed a death certificate he knew was wrong. But she still didn't have proof of what had happened to Eleanor. Suspicion wasn't evidence. A doctor's guilty conscience wasn't a confession. She needed Eleanor's records, the documentation she'd been compiling, the evidence she'd gathered before she died. Ruth got out of the car and walked to the payphone.
Helen, I need one more thing. The inventory list from Eleanor Marsh's estate. Whatever was in her office when she died.
Ruth, you're scaring me.
I'm scaring myself, but I'm close. I just need to find where she hid it.
Helen sighed.
I'll see what I can find.
That night, Ruth went back to the alumni directory, looked up everyone who had worked in special collections during Eleanor's last year. Margaret Weaver, the lawyer in Boston, the student who'd died, and one more name she'd missed before, a work-study student who'd graduated in 1979, the year after Eleanor died. Carol Marsh, Eleanor's daughter. Ruth found the listing. Carol Marsh, class of 1979. Current address, 47 Oak Street, Pemberton, Massachusetts. 3 blocks from the college. 4 blocks from Philip Pemberton's house. Eleanor's daughter had never left town. Ruth closed the directory and sat back. The radiator clanked. Outside, the wind was picking up, rattling the windows. She had one more person to talk to, one more piece of the story. Tomorrow. She'd find Carol Marsh tomorrow. 47 Oak Street was a Cape Cod cottage, white with blue shutters, the kind of house that looked like it had been there since the Revolution. The woman who answered the door was in her late 20s, with her mother's sharp eyes and careful posture.
Can I help you? Carol Marsh? I'm Ruth Vickers. Your mother was my graduate advisor.
Carol's expression went still.
I know who you are. Margaret Weaver called me. Said you were asking questions.
I'm trying to find out what happened to your mother.
She died. Heart attack. That's what happened.
That's what the death certificate says. But you worked in special collections. You saw what she was finding.
Carol's hand tightened on the doorframe.
I was a student. I filed papers and shelved books.
You were her daughter. She would have told you things she didn't tell anyone else.
Carol was quiet for a long moment. Then she stepped back from the door.
You'd better come in.
The cottage was small but neat. Books everywhere, on shelves, on tables, stacked in corners. Carol had inherited her mother's relationship with the printed word. They sat in the kitchen. Carol made coffee without asking.
My mother spent her whole life in that library. She knew every book, every card, every inch of that collection.
And she found something wrong.
She found patterns. Books that were supposed to be donated that had purchase receipts. Appraisals that didn't match the original documentation. Insurance claims for items that had never been properly accessioned.
Did she know who was responsible?
She suspected. But she wanted proof. She was building a file, copies of everything, cross-referenced, annotated.
What happened to that file?
Carol looked down at her coffee.
It disappeared. The night she died. When I came to clean out her office, everything was gone. Her notes, her copies, her index cards, all of it.
Someone took it.
Someone took it.
Ruth set down her coffee.
Carol, I've talked to Margaret Weaver. I've talked to Professor Prentice. I've talked to Philip Pemberton.
Carol's head came up.
Philip talked to you?
He told me he signed your mother's death certificate without an autopsy. He told me his brother asked him to.
I know. I've known for 4 years.
Why didn't you do anything?
Do what? Go to the police? The Pembertons own this town. They built the college, they fund the hospital, they sit on every board that matters. Who was going to believe a grieving daughter over the founding family?
Her voice cracked.
I stayed because I couldn't leave her. I stayed because I thought someday someone would come asking the right questions.
I'm asking.
I know, but I can't give you what you need. The file is gone. The proof is gone.
Ruth leaned forward.
Your mother spent 31 years in that library. She knew every inch of it. If she wanted to hide something, where would she put it?
Carol was quiet for a long moment. Then she stood up and walked to the window.
There's a section of the stacks. 3rd floor, northeast corner. Dewey 912. Maps and atlases. My mother called it the forgotten corner. No one ever went there.
912. The same classification she used on the atlas.
She was meticulous about everything. If she made a mistake on that last card, it wasn't a mistake.
She was leaving a trail.
She was leaving a trail for someone who knew her well enough to follow it.
Ruth stood up.
I need to get into special collections.
Hadley won't let you in. Not now.
Then I need to find another way.
Carol turned from the window.
There's a service entrance. Staff only. I still have a key.
You kept it?
I kept everything. I've been waiting 4 years for someone to come.
They waited until evening. The library closed at 9 on weeknights. By 9:30, the cleaning staff had finished the main floors. Carol led Ruth around the back of the building, past the loading dock, to a door marked Staff Only. The key turned smoothly in the lock. The stairwell was dark. Ruth followed the beam of Carol's flashlight up 3 flights, through a fire door, into the stacks. The 3rd floor smelled of old paper and dust. No one had been up here in a long time.
Northeast corner. Past the European history section.
They moved through the narrow aisles, past shelves packed with books no one had touched in years. The flashlight beam caught dust motes swirling in the stale air.
Here. 912.
The section was smaller than Ruth expected. 3 shelves of oversized atlases, their leather spines cracked with age.
Your mother spent 31 years here. If she hid something, it would be somewhere only she would think to look.
Ruth ran her hand along the spines, stopped at 912.492.
Maps of the Netherlands.
Ruth pulled the atlas from the shelf. It was heavy, leather-bound, gold lettering on the spine. Bleu's Atlas Major, 1662. She opened it carefully. The maps inside were beautiful, hand-colored, gilt-edged, the kind of work that didn't exist anymore. But between the maps of Amsterdam and Rotterdam, someone had slipped a manila folder. Ruth's hands trembled as she opened it. Inside were index cards, dozens of them, covered in Eleanor's precise handwriting. Each card documented a discrepancy: a book, a donor, an appraisal, an insurance claim. And clipped to the front was a letter, dated November 12th, 1978, 2 days before Eleanor died. The letter was addressed to the state attorney general. It outlined everything: the inflated appraisals, the fraudulent insurance claims, the role of the Pemberton family and Warren Hadley. It was signed by Eleanor Marsh. It had never been mailed.
She was going to blow the whistle.
And someone stopped her.
The lights came on. Ruth and Carol froze. The fluorescent tubes overhead buzzed and flickered, flooding the stacks with harsh white light. Warren Hadley stood at the end of the aisle. He was wearing a dark overcoat, and his face had lost its careful smile.
I thought I might find you here.
Ruth closed the folder and held it against her chest.
How did you know?
Carol's been watched since her mother died. The family wanted to make sure she didn't cause any trouble.
You killed her.
I didn't kill anyone. Her heart gave out. It happens.
It happens when someone is frightened badly enough, or when someone puts something in their coffee.
Hadley's expression didn't change.
You have no proof of that. You have suspicions and old paperwork. Neither will hold up in court.
Then why are you here?
To offer you a choice.
Hadley walked toward them slowly. His footsteps echoed in the empty stacks.
The Pemberton family has been very patient with you, Miss Vickers. They've allowed your investigation to proceed because they hoped you would realize the futility of it.
The futility of documenting fraud? Of proving that a woman was murdered?
The futility of fighting an institution that has existed for 150 years. Pemberton College isn't going anywhere. The family isn't going anywhere. You, on the other hand...
He stopped a few feet away.
Give me the folder. Go back to your archives. Forget what you found here.
And if I don't?
Then the college will be forced to take legal action. Trespassing, theft of college property, defamation if you try to publish.
Ruth looked at the folder in her hands. Eleanor's handwriting. Eleanor's evidence.
This isn't college property. It's Eleanor Marsh's personal research.
It was found in a college building. That makes it college property.
It was hidden by someone who knew it would be stolen if she left it in the open.
Ruth stepped around Hadley. He didn't try to stop her.
I know what you did. You inflated appraisals for 20 years. You helped the Pemberton family defraud insurance companies and the federal government. And when Eleanor Marsh figured it out, you made sure she couldn't tell anyone.
You have no proof of that.
I have her letter. I have her documentation. I have a doctor who'll testify that he signed a false death certificate.
Hadley's composure cracked.
Philip won't talk. He's family.
He's a man with a conscience and a disease that's going to kill him. He wants to die with a clean soul.
Ruth walked past him, Carol close behind. At the end of the aisle, she turned.
I'm going to publish this. I'm going to send copies to the State Attorney General, the Insurance Commission, and every newspaper in New England. You can try to stop me, but you'll have to explain why.
She walked into the stairwell. Carol followed. Behind them, Hadley stood alone in the fluorescent light. Ruth drove through the night, Carol in the passenger seat, the folder on the seat between them. They stopped at a 24-hour copy shop in Worcester. Ruth made 3 copies of everything: the index cards, the letter, the documentation. She put 1 copy in an envelope addressed to the State Attorney General. Another went to the Boston Globe. The 3rd she kept. The originals went to Carol.
Hide these somewhere safe, somewhere no one would think to look.
I know a place.
Your mother would be proud of you.
Carol looked at the folder in her hands.
She always said that libraries aren't just for storing books. They're for preserving truth, even when people try to hide it.
Ruth dropped the envelopes in the mailbox outside the post office. The metal door clanged shut. By morning, Eleanor Marsh's evidence would be in the hands of people who could do something about it. The story broke 3 weeks later. The Globe ran it on the front page. Pemberton College fraud scheme spans decades. The article named Warren Hadley. It named Harold Pemberton IV. It detailed the inflated appraisals, the insurance claims, the federal grant money obtained through fraudulent documentation. It mentioned Eleanor Marsh. It said she had died while investigating the fraud. It said her death certificate had been signed by a family member of one of the conspirators. The state attorney general opened an investigation. The insurance companies filed civil suits. The National Endowment for the Humanities demanded repayment of their grants. Hadley resigned. Harold Pemberton IV stepped down from the board of trustees. Philip Pemberton gave a statement to the investigators, corroborating everything Ruth had found. The case went to the state Supreme Court. And then it stopped. Ruth learned about the court order from Helen.
Sealed by judicial decree, pending resolution of civil litigation.
What does that mean?
It means the truth is documented, but no one's allowed to see it.
Ruth drove back to Pemberton one last time. The maples had lost their leaves. The campus looked gray and bare. She found Carol at the cottage on Oak Street. They sat in the kitchen where they'd first talked, drinking coffee that had gone cold.
The college is suing to recover costs from the investigation. They're claiming the fraud was limited to a few bad actors.
Hadley and the Pembertons.
They're making them the scapegoats, protecting the institution.
That's what institutions do.
Ruth looked out the window at the bare trees.
Your mother knew that. She knew she was fighting something bigger than any individual. But she did it anyway.
And she died for it.
She died trying to preserve the truth. That's not nothing.
Carol was quiet for a moment.
I'm leaving. Finally. Going to graduate school in Chicago. Library science.
Following in her footsteps.
Trying to. Someone has to remember what libraries are actually for.
Ruth drove back to the State Historical Society that evening. The building was closed, but she had her key. She went to her office in the basement, sat at her desk, and opened the folder she'd kept. Eleanor's index cards. Eleanor's letter. The documentation of a crime that would never be fully prosecuted. She opened the bottom drawer of her filing cabinet, the one marked personal. Inside was a stack of folders, cases she'd worked on over the years, records she'd preserved when institutions wanted them forgotten, truths that had nowhere else to go. She added Eleanor's folder to the stack. The clock on the wall read 11:15. Outside, the first snow of winter was starting to fall. Ruth closed the drawer and turned off the light. But she didn't leave. She sat in the dark, in the basement, surrounded by the paper records of things people wanted to forget. Someone had to remember. That was what archivists were for.